Hello and welcome back to ParticularPixels. I'm Xiaoling and this is Day of Infamy. So Day of Infamy is the next title by New World Interactive, the same team that brought us Insurgency. It's a tactical game, much like Insurgency was, but this time in a World War II setting. The game was in early access for quite some time, but I decided to wait until the game came out of early access before playing through it to give you guys my full impressions. So over the course of this weekend I spent around 10 hours with the game and I think I'm about ready to give you guys my opinion. Days of Infamy is predominantly a multiplayer title, or should I say that it's best played multiplayer, since there is a co-op mode in the game where you'll get to team with other players against the AI. But as with most games, playing the identical modes with people is going to be a much more enjoyable experience in my opinion. Also, there is no campaign in the game either, so that is something to keep in mind. The game has a number of modes to choose from where one team has to defend a front line. If it's taken, they have to fall back to the next point, very much like the rush mode in Battlefield 1 or the Battlefield games. Another mode tasks you with capturing 3 points, and whichever team holds the most points by the end of the match wins, very much like the Conquest mode in Battlefield 1. Another win condition across all the maps is also causing your enemy to run out of reinforcement waves. In Days of Infamy you can and will die very quickly, and when you die you won't instantly respawn, you'll need to wait for the next wave of reinforcements. These can be sped up if one of your teammates falls back and regroups, and then you'll just immediately respawn once they've done that, or if your teammate captures a new point you'll get to respawn. Alternatively, if none of that happens, you'll basically have to wait for a timer to count down before you respawn in the next wave of reinforcements. Of course, once your wave of reinforcements runs out and the last person dies, it's game over. However, the amount of waves depends on what game mode you're playing. So in the defending game mode where the enemy has to hold the front, for example, they'll have 12 reinforcement waves, whereas the attackers will start with 5. Every time the attackers capture 1 point, they'll gain additional 5 waves of reinforcement, and so on and so forth. Also, each 5 kills or assists will give your team an additional wave that you can use to respawn with. So it is an interesting mechanic. It forces you to be a little bit more careful when you are playing the game and making your way through the levels, especially as the waves of reinforcements get lower and lower. You have to be a little bit more careful so you just don't wantonly die for no apparent reason. As you play through the game, you'll also gain XP and slowly level up to unlock more divisions for each of the sides in the game. However, unfortunately, these new divisions are more of a cosmetic change than anything else, so that you can have a different look for your soldier when you're on the battlefield, which in one way is pretty cool, but they don't really offer any tangible difference, not as far as I could tell in the time that I played the game at least. The leveling in the game is painfully slow. In my 10 hours of play, I haven't even gotten to the 3rd rank yet, so I've unlocked a few new units, but I haven't unlocked any of the weapons that I can use in certain classes that you can switch between. The matches in the game do of course last a little while as well, but obviously depending on the mode. But death can come quickly and unexpectedly, and unlike most shooters, you aren't going to be shown where your attacker killed you from. So this is going to force you to move cautiously, check in all the corners, check in all the buildings and windows, I suppose as you would expect in any kind of tactical first-person game. The matches, because of this, can prove to be really tense. You will be using prone and crouch and walk. You will be sprinting and sliding to certain points of cover, and you'll be using all of these quite frequently because staying out of sight is key, since it is possible to die from any well-placed single shot. The other thing also is, obviously like any first-person shooting game, is learning the levels and where people are going to hide, because of course there are some favored points for people to camp and shoot you from, and where you have no idea where they were. Of course, this adds a great deal of tension to the match. There are grenades in the game that are pretty lethal as well. They'll basically send pieces of you flying everywhere, which your teammates will actually be able to see when they're transversing the battlefield. So you'll come across some hands and some feet and things like that. Pretty gruesome, but pretty cool indeed. There are also a number of different classes in the game. So you could have a rifleman, which I guess is the most common class because there's no limit to how many of those in a match you can have. The assault class, which there can only be 2 or 3 depending on the match you're playing. Snipers, support, captains, and radiomen. The captains can basically call in airstrikes, so bombs or smoke bombs to come in to provide cover. They can also call in supplies for when you run out of ammo. but they do require a radioman to be present so that they can relay the order. So there's some degree of teamwork obviously in the game, which I think is nice. Unfortunately, in my time with the game, I didn't hear anybody communicating over voice comms, and that's why I think playing this with a group of friends would probably give the best experience, since you could be communicating via voice constantly as you play the game. So every class is good at something. Assault and flamethrower troopers are best at clearing out small spaces and buildings. The riflemen are better for medium range encounters, and obviously the snipers for long range encounters. Some units are better for certain levels, obviously. Unfortunately, there are only 6 different maps in the game. I think it's about 5 or 6 different maps in the game. So that was a little bit limited as well. Some are very open, some are of course more urban spaces. So there was some variety with that at least. Each team also, as I said earlier, has a limited amount of how many of each class they can take, but when you do die in Day of Infamy, you can choose before the next wave is deployed to spawn in as a different class if there are spaces for that class available. Smoke grenades are used frequently in the game as well to provide cover, and from what I've played so far at least, seem like they are pretty crucial in getting you anywhere in the game so that you don't get sniped before you've run 100 meters. The matches hold up to 32 players, although there are smaller variants in the different modes as well. But personally, I think the 32 player servers offer the most enjoyment and the best experience. The gunplay otherwise I think is very enjoyable, very satisfying also when you get kills, because it's not always so easy to get kills. It takes some time, of course, getting used to the various weapon sights in the game. My word of advice would be do not play this like it's Battlefield 1. Like Rainbow Six Siege, this should be played tactically, so you want to check every corner, you want to stay prone, you want to stay behind cover. Unfortunately though, I would have to say that Day of Infamy's visuals let it down. Just by looking at it, you would think that the game came out more than 5 years ago. And by looking at the screenshots and comparing them to something like Call of Duty 2, I would say you'd almost be hard-pressed at first glance to tell the difference. And I think with the exception that some of the textures may be a little bit higher res, the game looks pretty old. By itself, I don't think that this would have been so much of an issue, since of course visuals are not everything, and there are some very average / even bad looking games that have some amazing gameplay. The issue is that while it looks like a 5-year-old game, it also suffers from some serious performance issues. I've heard also apparently Insurgency suffers from some of these issues as well. I'm running on an i7-6700K with 32 gigs of DDR4 and a GTX 1080, and at 1080p on maximum detail, I've seen my frame rate drop into the low 60s. Now you might be saying, so what, 60 is playable? And yes, I'll say 60 is playable, but this system is not what the majority of players are going to be running on. If my PC is dropping into the low 60s, it's almost guaranteed that anyone with lower spec PC is going to drop below 60. And of course there are plenty of posts on the Steam forums talking about the performance issues that are present in this game. So this is something that you are going to have to keep in mind if this is a game that you feel like picking up. And a game like Battlefield 1, which looks infinitely better, never drops below 90 or 100 frames a second on this computer. And yeah, so of course it's a little bit surprising to see a game that looks so old run so badly. I understand that this game is not a AAA title and will likely have significantly smaller team and a significantly smaller budget, but this game is built on the Source engine, so it really did surprise me that it performed so badly. So yeah, I don't know, I think they need a little bit more optimization with this particular game. The other complaint I have about the game are the controls. They feel a little bit clunky, to be honest. Perhaps it's because I'm used to playing the newer first-person shooters that allow you to vault over stuff and traverse the maps in a relatively smooth and flowing way, and unfortunately that's not the case in Day of Infamy. I don't know if this is because they're trying to keep it slow and deliberate, but in Day of Infamy I constantly found myself getting stuck behind objects that seemed very low that I should just be able to walk over, or getting stuck on small steps so I couldn't actually go up them. I had to be in a very specific place, or directly in front of them to run up them. Numerous times I even got stuck in a doorway that looked like I could get through, but obviously my shoulder was clipping on the edge, so it prevented me from getting through, and it led to me getting killed a few times. I mean, obviously some of these times would have been my fault, but other times I don't think it was. And these issues are something I've really not encountered in a first-person shooter for many years. So this, along with the visuals, make me feel like I'm playing a really old game that hasn't evolved with gaming as it's progressed over the past few years. And finally, finding a server was somewhat of a mission as well. There were really only 2 servers, for me at least. I'm based in Norway, so obviously I was looking at European servers. I think the server was in London that had good ping that I could join. Well, there were only 2 servers that actually had people on them. Let me reiterate that. The rest were all completely empty. Now, there are a lot of empty servers in the server browsers as well, across all the regions of the game. And looking at the Steam charts, you see the breakdown of the players. Really, it doesn't really have a massive player base. So that is something you're going to need to keep in mind as well. So the question is Day of Infamy worth picking up for $20? And if I had to be entirely honest with you guys, I would have to say no. Now, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that the game is bad, but it's not groundbreaking and it's not amazing either. There are plenty of tactical games that you can buy that would probably offer you a better experience than this game. The small player base is the first thing. I think that is something that's going to be an issue. The fact that the game feels extremely dated does hurt the title in my opinion as well. And as I mentioned earlier in the video as well, the leveling times are extremely long, so there are little to no rewards for leveling up. The classes you unlock are more of a cosmetic change, and again, in my 10 hours of playing, I didn't unlock a single new piece of equipment that I could use on any of my available classes. So I would say that if you really want to pick up Day of Infamy, I suggest you wait for a deep sale before picking the game up. Anyways, guys, I think that about wraps up my impressions of the game. As usual, if you have any questions or comments, you can leave them in the section below. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, you can leave a like and subscribe for future content updates. Otherwise, if you didn't enjoy the video, there is the dislike button as well. I've been Xiaoling. Until next time.